Started. Good morning, everybody, and welcome to another edition of Disney-McLane University. Today's class will be going over commercial leak. Commercial leak detection. And presenting today will be Alexa Porter. She's with Leak Defense, a Watts Water Technologies brand. If you have any questions during the chat or during the presentation, use the chat feature, and we'll answer each in turn at the end of the presentation. So without further delay, I'll pass this on to Alexa.
Okay, thank you, Jim. Good morning.
Morning.
So today, as Jim prefaced, we will be going over different commercial leak defense systems and also talking about the origination of leak detection solutions, how they have evolved and become more complex based on the need. Also, you will be receiving ASPE CEU credits for this presentation. If you have any questions in regards to that, definitely let us know. Certainly, leak detection capabilities is critical in multifamily and commercial structures. First of all, being able to identify where the greatest risks for leaks are in those applications. Also, there are different tiers and capabilities associated with these leak detection systems. So we'll talk about some of the advantages and disadvantages of those types of systems. Also,
her boyfriend went to France last week.
We'll also talk about flow-based leak detection, which is consistent with what our system offers, and then identify some of the considerations for building owners, engineers, mechanical HVAC, plumbing contractors. And of course, also looking at the ROI for these types of systems. So most of you are aware of some of the different facets in the building in terms of course, backflow prevention on the mechanical side, fire protection, security, so there aren't unwanted intrusions, risking the safety of the occupants of the building. And you're aware of most of these preventative, cautionary types of devices because much of the time they're required, often required by law. So there are certainly various types of water leak detection systems around as well. They've been present for about 3 to 4 decades, and it spans more than just overflow on a HVAC water pan or tiny pucks in a bathroom, and is even excelled to sub-metering devices, which also in a sense those can play a limited role in detecting leak detection and really their role in the leak detection system. Also, as we certainly get into the fact that water is a premium, and so sustainability and conservation efforts have certainly become more front of mind as well. But certainly many parameters to consider here in addition to the already typical protection devices in the building from electrical and fire. So the question here is, why worry about leak protection? I'm sure many of you who are listening to this have experienced probably personal experience or experience on the job with the unnecessary or undetected flow of water. So really when leak defense got kicked off, probably about 2006, 2007 with this technology. Many of the large insurance carriers in the market were the first to latch on. They were usually the ones typically being stuck with large claims, and so they were very much incentivized to have protective measures in place. And mainly because water damage is the #1 cause of property loss and claims in commercial buildings. So it's a $10 billion a year problem and growing. On the residential side, the average claim is about $10,000. And then much more elevated on that side with the commercial claim, average commercial claim being around $90,000. Water, obviously with gravity, water knows no bounds. It's going to fluctuate with where it's meant to go. So buildings that do not have protection on nights, weekends, holidays, or when there's typically not occupants in the building, those are typically when we hear of these nightmarish occasions. And certainly you think from a building occupancy standpoint, the tenants, the lawsuits that could ensue, having to relocate those tenants, whether it be for offices or even residential living, certainly a lot to think about when the technology exists to work to prevent these types of occurrences. So as I mentioned, water is the #1 cause of property damage. We partner with many of the large insurance companies to streamline this process. Much of the time we are dealing post-loss, and then we do also work with many of the insurance companies pre-loss. Also, another health hazard in this case is the fact of how quickly mold can develop, and the health hazard that certainly that causes for breathing, especially for children or anybody that might be asthmatic and sensitive to those types of conditions. So just want to go over some more of the statistics of how costly water damage is. Some customers estimate for an average leak at $25,000 per floor. So if, depending on the magnitude of the damage, whether there's multiple floors affected, 3 to 4 floors, this can certainly start to pile up very quickly. And that's how we really get at that average number of 90,000. Typically, we see $75,000 to $100,000 in damage on a per floor for a commercial basis. So certainly this is ultimately what we see. We see building owners rolling the dice. They have that typical notion of this isn't going to happen to me, or we have some precautions in place that can prevent and mitigate catastrophic water damage, but ultimately it's too little. That is too little the case. Certainly the disruption of a flood in a building is very real. On a particular application that I worked on in a high-rise building in Philadelphia, it's a 37-story office building.
Hey Alexa, I think you're muted.
Sorry.
Okay, can you hear me now? Sorry about that. Hello? Can you hear me?
We can hear you.
Yeah, we can
Okay.
hear you now.
It was
Okay,
just for 10 seconds.
Okay. All right, so I'll get started back on this slide, but so ultimately, what happens if you roll the dice? Many building owners do decide to go, take this route and having the notion of this isn't going to happen to me. In a particular application that I've had firsthand experience with, a 37-story office building in Philadelphia. They had an 1.25-inch galvanized cap that blew over the weekend, and water flooded the building into the elevator shafts, killed the electrical. Probably for about 8 hours before someone got there on Monday morning to realize that there was a major problem. This particular instance caused, upwards of $3 to $4 million. It directly affected their largest tenant in the office building, who about 6 months later, they lost that tenant. So certainly it can be a domino effect of insult to injury when it comes to water damage. There are certainly many instances, as I just described, from a personal or commercial standpoint, whether it's corroded pipes on a hot water tank relief valve that goes undetected for an entire weekend, or during the holidays when there's not anybody occupying the building, or a renovation where something gets left on, or there's certain water pipes that aren't capped. That can certainly happen. And then certainly below the Mason-Dixon, there have been, in the last few years, freezing weather, uncharacteristic for these areas, that have caused major issues as well with insulation or broken water pipes from both residential to multifamily to commercial uses. So from a standpoint of analyzing buildings with increased risk for leaks, we have a handful here from this standpoint, but it goes without saying that every building has a risk of leaks. Any building that has water flowing in it assumes that risk for damage. So certainly new construction or newer buildings have a period of shakedown. So that is certainly whether the building was pressure tested or not adequately pressure tested to what the building experiences during full occupancy. Some of those fittings can give way. It's certainly also the course of construction during a building's multiple construction phase where there might be a leak or something that happens during that time, which affects the ultimate goal of when the building would be completed. Certainly, we talked about the climate extremes that we have experienced as of late, and then certainly the example I gave in Philadelphia. That was a building that was constructed in the late '60s. So it turns out that there are multiple issues in that building, but it can be overwhelming to address all of those at a given time. So diving further into this in terms of water uses in an office building, the key takeaway here is that 78% of the water is used inside the building, obviously excluding landscaping there. So we've got various fixtures, various components of this room. So nearly 80% is contained inside the building. And so if there's any abnormal flow that is unnoticed or unchecked, this certainly elevates the risk for damage in this particular case. Also expanding on that, we look at the all of these key points are potential sources of leaks in a commercial building. So,
Hey, Alexa,
yes.
I'm sorry. There's like a black box at the bottom of the screen. Can you just minimize? There you go. Perfect. Thank you.
Definitely. So we've got various bullet points here of sources of water in a commercial building, and I'm sure since many of you work with these applications on a daily or weekly basis, you can think of even more that might be present as well. In this particular image, this was a leak that went obviously undetected. The source was through the bathroom. I'm not sure if it was one of the flush valves or not, but certainly extremely inconvenient and also a hazard to many of those kids that occupy that building on a typical basis. So also expanding on that, multiple water sources in multifamily and commercial applications. Okay, so getting into some of the prevention key points and really where we have come. So one particular initiative here could be the appliance protection. So having flood protection on the washer unit. Also having a mechanism in the drip pan. So if the hot water heater drip pan is overflowing. So those are some single source protection options. Another tactic would be point of leak, also known as hockey pucks or water pucks. These can also, you have extended range on those pucks as well with water detecting cables. And then the final tactic here would be flow monitoring. So that would be on the domestic water line inside the pipe, flow protection. Many of you are probably familiar with the first two tactics, tactic A and P, appliance specific protection and different water source, placing water pucks to alert in that case. But oftentimes we find that unless anybody is present, those audible alarms on the puck really can only go so far. So you might be thinking, well, if those are some of the surface level areas of protection, where are we now in 2023 in terms of protection? Those outside the pipe water pucks, insurance finds those options, surface level options, about 14% effective in mitigating water damage. So combining some of the technology that has been around since the existence of flood protection and leak detection, combined with inside the pipe flow sensing and automatic shutoffs, definitely increases the effectiveness in mitigating and preventing catastrophic damage. So expanding into the previous slide a little bit more in terms of appliance shutoffs, you're most likely familiar with some of these leak prevention automatic appliance shutoff functions that would be more consistent with a tier 1 or tier 2 approach. Some of these devices certainly are dependable in preventing leak or sending notification, but it's not a full-blown offering from this standpoint when it's just shutting off the water to that particular unit. In terms of water puck screamers only, I touched on it briefly that you have to be within earshot if there's no expanded connectivity with these options. So certainly a popular choice in leak detection, and certainly a cost-effective or a low budget option. But many of these are battery powered, or they might depend on Wi-Fi, which certainly limits some of the connectivity options for this particular key point in trying to prevent leaks. So tactic F would be that flow monitoring with automatic shutoff, certainly more than the 14% effectiveness in preventing catastrophic damage. Some of these options are algorithmic, or they have a learning cycle of the water habits. And certainly others are suitable for both hot and cold supply. Certainly some are not, with more plastic connections. So really with this option, if talking about commercial applications, if you can zone the building out with some of these more enhanced mitigation options, it certainly offers more protection to avoid catastrophic water damage. So certainly some of these commercial buildings have a lot of complexity. There's complexity to the water system, from booster pumps to other facets. If we're talking hospital or clinics, some of those applications, typical to see MRI or X-ray equipment that require or rely on chilled water for their function. So it's certainly the cost as well to protect some of those machines in that application is vital as well. Ultimately, in terms of monitoring, response, and reporting, the ability to tie in to a building automation or a building management system is very important. Wired or wireless connectivity. Some of the more modernized systems have the ability to be hardwired. We talked about it briefly about wireless or Wi-Fi connection, having to rely on the cloud or different Bluetooth signals is certainly also important to consider in some of these large applications, or whether all of these devices will require wall power electricity, or if we're looking at a situation where we would have to change out batteries. Certainly from a government aspect, that is certainly something to consider from a network security standpoint. A lot of the times there's a lot of red tape in being able to connect or be on the same network servers as those devices. I also found that in some of these urban buildings, some of the office buildings in Philadelphia or New York City, they have 24/7, 365 security. Somebody is always there to ensure the building is safe, and also ensuring anyone who's trying to get into the building has the proper credentials. So certainly being able to tie those folks into the visibility of what's happening, if there's any alerts, so that whether an automatic shutoff occurs or someone can be notified, that is certainly possible from that standpoint as well. Also, adaptability, the ability to interface with some of these various functions of the water system, from tankless water heaters to recirc pumps, even the ability to isolate irrigation controls. Also, interfacing with the building security so that each floor or the building, we know whether it is occupied based on that fact alone. So certainly with the expansion of technology, we've had the ability to further integrate the communications with these devices for added connectivity. So in terms of the eyes or what you see, in this particular case, we don't always want to rely just on smartphone. Maybe there's an issue with Wi-Fi, which I've seen in some of these buildings. You don't have an adequate Wi-Fi connection, so you don't have visibility to that platform. So do these leak detection devices have other sources, an on-site control panel, or a desktop viewing dashboard? So much of this information can be captured from that standpoint and not totally reliant on Wi-Fi or smartphone network connectivity. So this would give you all of various viewing parameters to live flow of the water, the domestic water line, what the temperature of the water is, whether any of those outside the pipe water pucks are experiencing low battery. So certainly the signal strength and the customizations of the leak detection technology has certainly expanded greatly. So with inside the pipe flow detection, there is the enhanced ability for various analytics as well. Some of these systems have the ability to install on both a hot or cold water line, and also high pressure and high torque protective electronics for that case as well. So we've expanded and adequately making sure that we can cover more than that 14%. And prevent stop a leaks in its track and prevent catastrophic damage. Certainly, all of these applications look a little bit different, so the customization is certainly there. How enhanced or how basic of a leak detection system are you looking for? We also do have a condo case study that you can see specifically what went into the decision making, whether it's monitoring the hot and cold water line or the domestic water line on a per unit basis. And this allows us to design a system and add multiple stacks and make sure that there's adequate coverage, especially thinking from a condo standpoint, especially if it's in Florida. It could be a snowbird or intermittent occupancy, meaning that there's infrequent visitors and less likely to be able to act quickly and see an issue if it's happening in that building. Various design methods that we have. Certainly, here's another condo application that could be configured. And then in addition to the on-site color touchscreen control panel, there is also the ability to receive alerts and customize those notifications on the smartphone app as well. In terms of data and monitoring multiple valves, whether it be stacks and risers in a commercial building or each floor on an office building or each unit on a condo. From a maintenance or a BMS standpoint, our system can provide visibility to each of those units, what the live flow is, and also if there's any unnecessary flow detected. Certainly, those alerts and remote notification of that occurrence can be detected, or the ability to just turn the water on or off remotely. So certainly, as technology has evolved, this has allowed for more connectivity to prevent costly and inconvenient damage such as water. So certainly the return on investment here goes without saying, from the cost savings from the insurance side, from risk mitigation, being able to stay on schedule in terms of course of construction, and certainly for the safety of the tenants in the building, and maintenance and overhead. There's certainly a lot of value that goes into investing in suitable leak detection systems. So I talked about it briefly, but we do have a condo case study in Florida. They were having reoccurring incidents where the occupants weren't necessarily on site. And so ultimately the HOA got involved and contacted leak defense, and each unit was able to have its own system monitoring as well as connectivity to the on-site staff. And ultimately, they've been able to mitigate loss and claims and been able to just enjoy that space rather than dealing with remediation and increased insurance costs. So certainly a wise investment from this standpoint, and with the modularity of the system, the forward and backward capability, there's certainly ways to invest in this type of technology to protect the building and certainly protect the owners and the occupants from these types of inconveniences. So just wrapping up here with the leak detection and for commercial and residential applications, hopefully you feel that you're adequately able to explain why leak detection is important. Identify which buildings, which types of constructions are at greater risk for leaks and water damage. And hopefully you have more knowledge now in the different types of leak detection systems that are available on the market and some of the limitations that some of them have as opposed to others. And why the basic operation of flow-based leak detection, we find, and our insurance partners in the industry find that this is more of an effective way to mitigate damage. And then certainly why this information is relevant for building owners, engineers, and certainly the insurance carriers. All right. Any questions with that? Sorry, I went 5 or 6 minutes over, but certainly open to any questions from that standpoint.
I don't see any questions in the chat. Anybody have any questions? We can open it up. No? Okay. Well, thanks, Alexa. Great presentation, and thank you all for joining us today. As a reminder, this is an ASPE CEU class, and I'll be sending your ASPE CEUs later today. This was recorded, and it will also be on our YouTube channel later today as well, in case you want to review it again or share it with your staff. So yeah, thanks again, and be sure to tune in next time. Our next class will be in December, the last one for 2023. It'll be covering fire stopping. So thanks again, everyone, and thank you, Alexa. Hope you all
Thanks,
have a good day.
everyone.
Thank you.